I'd like to welcome everyone to webinar 3, where we're going to be talking about the New South Wales SEPP and how it relates to the non-residential aspect, including NABERS. I'll wait a little bit of time for more attendees to join. I'd like to informally introduce Ron Polito, who is the sector lead within market development and who worked on the SEPP with the planners and government architect, as well as Ryan Flack, who will be in the background. He is the senior policy officer. He's working on the new builds team and he's working on the Closing the Performance Gap project. So in the previous webinars, we talked about, in webinar 1, the problem, the performance gap. In webinar 2, we worked with the GBCA to demonstrate the solution, how rating tools can assist with reducing the performance gap. And today we're going to demonstrate an example of new policy that's going to utilize those tools to reduce the performance gap. I'd like to remind everyone as well, there is also going to be webinar 4 on the 19th of October, where we'll be putting this into practice. It'll be less of a webinar and more of a workshop. We'll be working with you face-to-face or camera to camera, and we'll be putting into practice how to implement these policies and these rating tools within your own policy. So today we'll be talking about the SEPP in relation to NABERS. We'll be speaking about the non-residential aspect. So any questions or queries with regards to the residential aspect would be better answered by the planning team or even the government architect. So if you do have those questions, please pop them into the Q&A and we can point you in the right direction to the people to ask. We've got 22 attendees, so I'll just wait a few more minutes for more people to jump in and we'll get started. Not as much of a trickle as I expect. I think I'll begin. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. They are the first people and traditional custodians of Australia, the oldest living and continuing cultural and human history. Today, I'm on the lands of the Gadigal people, and I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present, and commit to respect on the lands which we walk on and the communities we walk in. We celebrate the deep connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples to country and acknowledge their continuing custodianship of land, sea, and sky. We acknowledge the ongoing stewardship of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and the important contributions they make to our communities and economies. We reflect on the continuing impact government policies and practices recognise our responsibility to work together and for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, families, and communities towards improved economic, social, and cultural outcomes. So, where did the SEPP start? Back in 2019, energy ministers of each state territory agreed to the national trajectory for low energy buildings. The trajectory is a national plan that aims to achieve zero energy and carbon-ready commercial and residential buildings in Australia, and it is a key initiative to address Australia's 40% energy productivity improvement target by 2030 under the National Energy Productivity Plan. So the trajectory outlines policies to deliver cost-effective, energy-efficient improvements to homes and businesses. The aim of the policies are to lower energy bills, contribute to energy security and affordability, reduce carbon emissions, improve people's health and comfort, reduce wastage for the wider economy, and assist in lowering peak demand. And this has been all states and territories with the federal government have worked together on this. So how did the SEPP evolve? So back in 2019, as mentioned before, the energy ministers of each state and territory agreed to the national trajectory for low energy buildings. Between 2019 and 2021, consultation began with industry on higher basic standards in response to the government's net zero plan, stage 1. In late 2021, exhibition of the increased basic standards and non-residential initiatives was developed. In mid-2022, the development of the Sustainable SEPP was developed. In August 2022, the Sustainable SEPP was made. In September 2022 to 2023, the transition period and technical guidance finalized. And starting this week, the SEPP has commenced. So what is the SEPP? The SEPP is a new policy under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Acts to link design and performance, create multiple touch points to validate building design and efficiency, minimize the consumption of energy and potable water, promote disclosure of building efficiency, collect data on embodied carbon, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from energy use. So comparing that to the trajectory below, the national trajectory outlines certain things that they want to aim for: lower energy bills, that would be minimizing consumption of energy and water; contribute to energy security and affordability, that would be the same, minimizing consumption; reducing carbon emissions, that would be reducing greenhouse gas emissions; reducing wastage for the wider economy, just indirectly by measuring, we know that buildings become more efficient, so minimizing consumption; and assist in lowering peak demand, again, minimizing consumption of energy and potable water. So Sustainability SEPP is split into 3 parts. There is the general content, the residential content, and what we'll be discussing today, the non-residential content. So what is non-residential content? All buildings and developments in New South Wales, which includes all new non-residential developments in New South Wales and all new alterations, enlargements, extensions on existing building with capital investment of over $10 million is included, but it excludes developments affected by basics, so residential, exempt and compliant developments like CDCs, residential aged care and boarding houses, mining and most infrastructure, and other state significant. It does include certain state significant, like educational establishments, hospitals, medical centers, and health research facilities, cultural, tourist, and recreational facilities, and any large commercial buildings that are state significant. There's also large commercial developments defined within the SEPP, that is office buildings over 1,000 square meters, service apartments over 100 rooms, and hotels over 100 rooms. So how does it all work? So there are 6 major provisions. There are the general provisions, the embodied emissions reporting divisions. All non-residential developments are to do that. There is also the net zero statement, which large commercial developments and state significant developments are to adhere to. And large commercial developments are to have energy performance verifications, offsets purchased, and water performance verifications. So the general provisions. In deciding whether to grant consent to non-residential development, the consent authority must consider whether the development is designed to enable the following: the minimization of waste associated with demolition and construction, including by the choice of reuse of building materials; a reduction in peak demand for electricity, including the use of energy efficient technology; a reduction in the reliance of artificial lighting and mechanical heating and cooling through passive design; the generation and storage of renewable energy; the metering and monitoring of energy consumption; and the minimization of consumption of potable water. With regards to the embodied emissions reporting, the development consent must not be granted to non-residential development unless the consent authority is satisfied the embodied emissions attributable to the development have been quantified. Now, NABERS is actually working on the embodied emissions framework. This is to help measure, benchmark, and certify emissions from construction and building materials. The Sustainability SEPP will align with the NABERS framework when it's released in 2024. Currently, we don't have emission disclosures as yet. It will be an interim material form, which will capture the material amounts. This is goodness, lost my train of thought. There's a simple online template which can be found on the New South Wales Planning and NABERS website, and there'll be a link in this document. So there's also the net zero statement. So in deciding whether to grant development consent, development to which the section applies, the consent authority must consider whether the development will minimize the use of on-site fossil fuels as part of a goal of achieving net zero emissions in New South Wales by 2050. And that is for large commercial developments and for SSDs. Now, specifically for large commercial developments, there is the energy performance and verification and offsets. So there is a maximum benchmark emissions for target star rating. That's your kind of your minimum requirements within your CC in terms of your energy performance of your building. When OC is achieved and a NABERS rating is done, there'll be measurements for the actual emissions from the performance of the rating, where we'll be measuring the amount of electricity consumed and the amount of gas consumed. The performance gap is the difference between the management benchmark and the actual emissions, and that will need to be offset. And there's also on-site fossil fuel emissions, so that's gas, that will have to be offset as well. Now, how is that done? So when a NABERS rating has been obtained, first question is, has the energy target been achieved? If it has, no large generation certificates will be required, but if it hasn't, the purchasing of large generation certificates are required. The next is, does the building use on-site fossil fuels? So if there is any gas being consumed by the building, then Australian carbon credit units need to be purchased to offset that. There is also water performance verification, and this is a condition within the SEPP. The following must be given to the Council Authority using the New South Wales Planning Portal. So an assessment of a NABERS rating for water use achieved by the development prepared by an assessor or accredited NABERS. So unlike energy and similar to embodied carbon, water consumption generally doesn't get measured. Akin to the Commercial Building Disclosure Scheme, the SEPP will assist with disclosing and measuring consumption of water of a building, which will hopefully see a reduction in potable water consumption. As we measure, we use less. So what are the key takeaways? As the SEPP lists, for large commercial developments, office buildings need to have 5.5-star energy rating and a 3-star water rating, and hotels and service apartments require a 4-star energy rating and a 3-star water rating. So what are the takeaways? So a few other jurisdictions assess post-occupancy, making the SEPP a policy first. These new standards are considered a minimum requirement, setting a new expectation with clear NABERS outcomes, whilst giving local councils the opportunity to introduce even more stringent standards. A clear target is far more tangible than formal requirements. It is clear what performance needs to be met, and a simple star rating makes it easier for everyone to understand. There's also documentation at every step, at several steps. So at the DA stage, a NABERS agreement is signed. At the construction certificate stage, energy efficiency reports are required. And then beyond the OC stage, during post-occupancy, within 24 months, a NABERS rating will be required. So the key takeaway is designs at the DA stage are rarely complete or comprehensive. The Sustainable Buildings SEPP addresses the lack of early documentation by requiring verification at various stages through the DA, CC, and post-occupancy. This will ensure that the energy and water efficiency of the verified NABERS rating remains front and center and cannot be value engineered out. It also means by using NABERS and Sustainability SEPP, it harnesses a well-established, respected and trusted pathway that Australia's property industry already understands and uses. Disclosure to drive better buildings. So measurement leads to better management. The SEPP requires greater disclosure of energy and water efficiency of buildings, and every building captured under this policy will have its NABERS energy and water rating published on the NABERS website. So we know that disclosure drives organizations and people to do better. As investors, consumers, and employers, communities demand action on climate, the NABERS rating of each project captured by the SEPP will encourage the proponent to look more carefully at their energy modeling up front, because their building performance will be publicly available. What we've seen within the last 20 years of data from NABERS is the more you measure, the better management. So data sharing in the spotlight as well. So everything is going through the planning portal, and it's a digital application process, and it's just one single process where we're capturing the same type of data. So what New South Wales is planning to do is share with other jurisdictions with the Australian Building Codes Board to inform future policy. So by aligning all our systems together and ensuring a standard approach to data capturing and information sharing, what we'll do is it will allow and support everyone to work to improve, to promote sustainable outcomes with Australia's built environment. NABERS and the New South Wales government and industry are collaborating to ensure data is consistent. The digital system will introduce consistency to submissions, eliminating variations from different formats, styles, and data that have made data capture quite difficult in the past. So another key takeaway is all electric and net zero ready by 2035. So large commercial buildings and state significant developments must operate from 100% renewable energy by 2035. To demonstrate this, the proponent must submit a net zero statement verified by a qualified engineer. And this either confirms that a building is all electric or explains how it will be capable of operating all electric or from renewable sources by 2035. So the key takeaway of this is, by having this requirement, it encourages project teams to think carefully about the design of future-focused buildings. Will they need to develop a strategy to transition away from fossil fuels, or would it be better just to build all electric from the beginning? When project teams understand how to deliver all electric systems, this will hopefully assist other jurisdictions with delivering the same type of building. So another key takeaway is a sharper focus on embodied carbon. So to comply with the SEPP, at the construction certificate, embodied emissions or embodied carbon attributed development must be disclosed. This must be by a qualified surveyor, designer, engineer, or NABERS assessor. And currently there's an interim materials form, which will be submitted via the simple online template, which we found in the New South Wales planning system and on NABERS website. Why is this important? So as we aim to get to net zero, as our buildings become more and more efficient, as our grid becomes more decarbonized, and we are producing electricity through renewable sources, by 2050, embodied carbon could account for an estimated 85% of the built environment's carbon footprint. So at the moment, there is this interim material form that has been developed. We're now in October, the SEPP has commenced. In late 2023, the NABERS team will pilot the embodied carbon tool, and by mid-2024, the embodied carbon tool will be ready to use. So what are the key takeaways? This policy lays the foundation for a national embodied emissions reporting and action through NABERS. By gathering information on embodied carbon in construction materials, the SEPP will help build a vital evidence base to inform future benchmarks and targets as the market for low emission material starts to get measured. Now, similar to water in a certain manner, we need to start measuring in order to know where we are and how to do better. Another key takeaway is smaller energy performance gap. So what the SEPP is doing, it's addressing the performance gap by measuring. So this policy offers a solution for governments looking to align their net zero targets with planning rules that verify actual performance. With a signed NABERS agreement, all parties involved in the design and delivery of a building can rally around a shared, tangible target, one that's verified in operation. So we discussed in webinar 1 ways to close the gap. And I thought to bring it back to webinar 1, talk about the SEPP and how the SEPP is doing that. So the SEPP has standards, outcome-based policies. It promotes disclosure, awareness, and competition. The SEPP is doing all of that, which is awesome. So modeling. So in terms of the increased sophistication of modeling by design, by verifying the design in post-occupancy, hopefully we'll see better modeling at that CC stage. Reviewing. So independent QA process will hopefully pick up the issues through design. What the SEPP is allowing us to do is at least pick up these little things here and there throughout this whole process. And finally, verification. By having that NABERS rating, you're verifying the actual consumption of energy, water, and embodied carbon for your project. So taking the next steps. We've already discussed commitment agreements and why they're a very successful tool. They are only for energy, and they are for new builds, refurbishments, and alterations. What commitment agreements do really well is they have checkpoints in multiple stages for independent verification, which is usually missing at the design stage. Now, we've got a new contract called the Agreement to Rate, and this is designed for policymakers. It's quite simple. All it says is, I will commit to doing a rating. It doesn't say what the rating will be, what score it'll be. It will not, you won't be able to advertise, you won't be able to say what rating you're aiming at, but it just says that at the DA stage, I would like to do a rating when my building is complete. So the New South Wales SEPP is the first example of utilizing this contract. So we've compared the two before, but I just thought just to add this back in. So yes, commitment agreements have inbuilt frameworks for quality assurance, but they are a tad bit more expensive because there's a fair amount of work in terms of all the checks and all the modeling to make sure that it works. And it is only for energy. So we're really pushing and promoting this agreement rate because it's a great tool to embed within policy framework to allow for the checks and verifications and compliance measures. Again, it doesn't allow for the target and it doesn't have a QA process, but it can include energy, water, indoor environment, waste, and embodied carbon. And it is cheaper to do as well. So, closing the Form SEPP project. We know that the earlier we do this, the better it will be. So the sooner we start to measure, the sooner we know where we are. One key takeaway is the New South Wales SEPP, combined with the agreement to rate, will assist with the standardized approach to measure, disclose, and make aware of how our buildings are performing. We've already seen how the power of disclosure through the Commercial Building Disclosure Scheme has fast-tracked energy efficiency of commercial buildings in Australia. This SEPP will introduce the same type of disclosure for water and embodied carbon. So how can we help? We've got a free in-depth training course for council staff available on NABERS training page. An example on the screen at the moment is using NABERS Sustainable Building Planning within Victoria. There's one for each state and territory. So please join, click, and look into it. It covers a range of topics relating to net zero. There's also introduction to carbon neutral training, and yeah, so please join, click, and learn as much as we can. So how can NABERS help? We're always happy to answer questions, discuss options, just call or email, and consider and discuss partnerships of ways of working together. So the webinar series. The first series we discussed the design and performance, power of a unified approach, where we talked about the problem, the performance gap. The second webinar, we discussed with the GBCA the tools to reduce the performance gap and the ways in which rating tools can assist reducing that gap. And today I've went through examples of policies to assist with reducing the performance gap. So webinar 4 will be our final webinar. It'll be more of a workshop than a webinar, and we'll be putting into practice what we've learned. So with the assistance of GBCA, we're going to workshop to assist with implementing policy within your own jurisdiction. So please join us for that. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone. And if there are any questions. Thank you, Ron, for the webinar stuff.
That's right. And I think I might just add something as well in case it prompts questions or makes people feel comfortable to reach out to us even after the webinar. You know, the biggest thing is that there's this SEPP. It's a huge thing, especially for New South Wales policy, and to see how other jurisdictions might look at doing something similar. But also, it's the start of the live date as well. So there's many things to be learned from people only just becoming aware of it, maybe even starting the journey, may not be familiar with sustainability standards in general. You know, you may be familiar with how NABERS ratings are used on a voluntary basis. Of course, now it may come to it, depending on where you are, you know, if you're a council, if you're a consultant working with building owners, or if you're an asset owner yourself, a lot of this may be new to you. And I think the biggest thing we want you to know is that we are part of that and we're happy to help. And if you have any questions on how to use or what your obligations are as part of the Sustainable Building SEPP are, how you use any of the NABERS rating tools or the agreement to rate, for example, to satisfy your compliance obligations as part of the SEPP, or even if you just think there's something that'll help you understand or help educate people within your team or even stakeholders you deal with, please feel free to let us know. I think if you're quite familiar with how the NABERS teams work, is we very much like to help everyone in any way that we can, because there is a value to it. There's a value to us in being able to you know, improve sustainability in general across the built environment, but also that there are people who may not be aware of how things are done. And it's really just talking about it, understanding, and really gaining insights from people that might be involved in it. So I just want to throw that out there as well in case it prompts you for questions now, but really, even after these webinar series or this webinar in general, or if you see us out and about, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thanks, Ron.
We've got a question from Rob Bunting. How does he get a copy of this PowerPoint?
Yeah, so we'll be issuing this PowerPoint as a PDF to everyone that's attended today. Do you have any other questions?
And you might have seen I dropped some links, and you'll also get the links as part of the webinar, but also as part of the notification that goes out after this, with some handy information we have on our website. It could be some of our fact sheets. We'll also be having some of the guides that come out, especially some information on, the agreements, right, understanding that and the difference between commitment agreements. If you feel like, or you'd like to suggest something that would be useful, maybe it would be even useful for you in your role now, maybe it'd be useful for you to distribute to, your council teams, let us know, because it could be something that we could work on as well. We've just got a few more questions flowing through, and then I think when the questions stop, we could probably end the webinar as well. But I'll pass that over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Ron. We've got a question from Sid. For large, significant new build for SEPP compliance, do they need to have 100% electrification while designing building, or can they have fossil fuels in design with a plan to eliminate them at a later stage? So for large commercial developments, they will need to have a plan, a net zero statement, to get 100% electrification by 2035. So it's not that far away, it's only 12 years. So the hope is it'll start to get people ready to think about it. If anything, it'll hopefully promote more buildings to push for electrification sooner rather than later. They can have fossil fuels in the design. It's just it'll have to be eliminated later, and there'll have to be a plan in place for the elimination of that. Any other questions?
Looks like it might be it. I'm just going to give them maybe 15 more seconds in case someone's in the middle of typing a question.
There we are.
We got one come through.
Thanks, Johanna. So Joanna asks, what's the cost of implementation of the SEPP calculated? I love to see data on the abatement of costs for embodied carbon. Ron, I'm gonna have to pass this to you, mate.
So the answer is yes, but this is unfortunately a question that we can't answer because we didn't implement or coordinate the overarching SEPP policy. What I could recommend is reach out to, there may be in the link that I dropped there, there should be a link to a contact to email on general SEPP queries. You may be able to get information there. But yes, as a part of any policy, whether it be state or federal, the government has to go through a very rigorous, basically cost-benefit analysis and regulatory impact assessment to determine the costs involved in not just creating the policy, but implementing it as well, and see the impacts on the industry, whether that be a net benefit, but also considering the costs involved. For example, if new things need to be mandated for anyone in the stakeholder ecosystem to go through. So the answer is yes. Unfortunately, we don't have the details of that. And so I'd suggest reaching out to the contact on the link to the SEPP policy. Sorry, I couldn't give you more detailed information.
Okay, well, if we don't have any further questions, we'll give you guys, oh, Rob, thank you. Okay, so Rob has asked, normally the energy modeling during design, JV3 verification modeling, only base build energy, sorry, Ron. Yeah, uses, thank you, Ron, uses is calculated. How does plug load fit in? No, monitoring around 25% of?
Noting around 25% of the energy use is from loose equipment.
Oh, okay. Ron, I'm going to have to send that your way as well.
So I may need to take that one offline, Rob, because I might need to get into a bit of detail on that. So let us get back to you.
Okay.
So we have had two other questions come through. I'll try to answer it the best I can. So got one from Susie. Do you know the difference between the standards implemented by City of Sydney for large commercial development versus the new SEPP? So I don't remember the details off the top of my head, but there are some differences there. You could say they're basically an exception to the standard one set within the SEPP. Essentially, they may be able to set higher targets in the SEPP, but I don't want to speak to the details of that. I think there are some links there in the non-residential website that will have the specifics there, but essentially the very simplified generic answer and the nice quick response that I like to do is, yeah, they can essentially set higher targets within the SEPP, whereas as part of the SEPP for the councils, which is something councils will need to consider as well, is that you need to set the targets within the SEPP.
So just to carry on from that, so the City of Sydney has the best practice energy performance. They aim for the 5.5 star NABERS rating plus 25%. They're also they've got a 2021 to 2024 plan, I believe it's 25, and then a 2026 onwards where they're actually aiming for even more stringent requirements. So they're going a little bit above and beyond what the SEPP is already doing. And we've got Jessica as well. Do you have an idea of the percentage of buildings will use NABERS to comply with the SEPP?
So I can give a bit of a high level on that one, and then you can maybe add in Michael. So I think it depends. So in terms of percentage of buildings that go through or development applications that'll be put through in the year, in terms of the NABERS requirements, and you have multiple NABERS products to consider. There's the NABERS agreement to rate, there's the NABERS commitment agreement, and then you've got your NABERS energy and water tools, for offices, all the building sectors that we have. And then the part where the NABERS are mandated is for the large commercial developments defined within the SEPP. And you'll see within those slides when you get them, it's offices over 1,000 square meters, it's hotels, motels, and service departments over 100 rooms. And so you must use the agreement to rate for your energy and water standards for all of those that come through. And then it depends, let's say there's 1,000 DAs that go through in New South Wales, what percentage of those are defined as large commercial developments, and then you could consider that. We don't have the numbers off the top of our head, but that was considered as part of the cost benefit analysis by the policy team when developing the policy itself. There may actually be some indicative numbers maybe not in that SEPP overview document, or at least you might be able to infer from it. And then apart from the agreements to rate being required for the energy standards for those large commercial developments, you could then opt to do the commitment agreement pathway, either to, one, make it easier for you to satisfy your compliance obligations of the SEPP, but also as one of the verification pathways to satisfy the energy standards of the NCC.
Thanks,
hopefully
Rob.
That answers your question.
Yeah,
and yeah, did you want to?
Yeah, no, we did an analysis of all development applications in the last financial year, and we believe there was around 50 or so that would have been large commercial developments in 2022-23. I can't tell you what the percentage is because there are a lot of DAs, but yeah, that's ballpark where we thought it was. Yeah. Is there anything else? Any other questions from anyone? Okay, well, Rob, we'll get back to you with regards to the energy modeling question. I'm sorry we can't. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. I'd like to say for webinar 4, please join us. If you haven't already joined, there'll be a link in the PDF that I'll be sending very shortly. It's to put into practice, it's to apply what the SEPP is already doing to local councils. So please join us where we can learn from each other and understand how your policies work and how rating tools can be implemented within your policies. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone and hope you all have a good day.
Great. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Ryan. See you all.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye.